What's good? This is Where's Yish. So I've been trying to find myself for a minute now. I didn't know I was lost at some point, but I lost myself. And it finally came to fruition that I had lost myself maybe about almost 7 years ago. 7, 8. It was 10, it would be 2006. So about 8 years ago, I lost myself. What do I mean by I lost myself? And I apologize if the video isn't very clear or whatnot. What do I mean by I lost myself? So, 2008, emotionally, I disappeared. I was no longer Yish the producer. I was still that guy, but I was no longer emotionally here. And I'm still struggling with that. But I started this channel today to talk about what I'm doing to find myself, or what I'm doing to help me find myself. So I started going to a therapist for what's called internal family systems therapy, IFS. If you want to know really more information about it than what I give you here, then just do a Google search for IFS. So a quick synopsis or a quick summary: IFS, internal family systems therapy, is therapy where you get in touch with you. You get in touch with your psyche. You get in touch with your, as they call it in IFS, parts. So let me give you an example. There are two types of parts. You have the protector parts. You have the exile parts. Within the protector parts, there's two types. There's managers and there's firefighters. So you have managers. You have managers, you have protectors, and you have exiles. So starting with the exile parts are those parts that have gone through a traumatic experience. And one of my exiles was when I was a child. I grew up poor, it was all kind of things going on in my family at that time. And, I wasn't what you would consider the usual kid. I grew up terrible clothes, all kind of bad things. I won't really get off into detail, but it left me in a place where the other kids were pretty much cruel, and mean. And so I had to deal with that as a child. And as a child, you don't know how to deal with those things. So what happens is you carry that traumatic experience through life, and if you don't have it nurtured, so to speak, at some point in life, it becomes a burden. And what happens is your other parts, your managers and your protectors, then kick in to want to protect you. Your managers and your firefighters, then kicks in to want to protect you. And they do things like, let's say for instance, as a grown person, you're very self-critical of yourself, right? That's being self-critical is a good thing. That keeps you doing things right. You do something and you criticize yourself. It could be constructive criticism. But when you have a childhood traumatic experience, you tend to got distracted there. When you have a childhood dramatic experience, that critical part then does things like tell you you're no good at something or you're bad at something, or you're, especially if that feeling, that same feeling that you had when you were a child, is reawoken. It's reawoken. Anyway, then your protective parts kick in and try to squash that feeling. Firefighter, so that would be a manager part. Self-critical would be a manager part. And since you never learn how to deal with those feelings and you still hold on to them, they're never let go. So your manager part goes into autopilot after a while. And whenever those feelings come up, you react in a certain way. You might react in a self-critical way. You might react in a fearful way. It all really depends on what traumatic experience you had as a child. It's getting dark, so let me hurry up. Your protectors basically, your firefighters basically, so just to make it short and sweet, your managers are your daily planners. They make sure that every step that you take is a good step, that it keeps you away from that feeling. If that feeling arises, then your firefighter is there to kick in. It'll do things like have you go have a drink or get drunk to drink away the pain, or take drugs, or go into some sexual behaviors, just to bring that feeling away. What happened to me was my traumatic experience as a child, were never dealt with. They were never nurtured. And so what ended up actually happening is I came to a point of emotional apathy where I was unavailable emotionally. In other words, I couldn't feel it where most of you feel it in your heart. Some of you might not be feeling it because you might be looking at this video for this very particular reason. But I lost my emotions. I couldn't feel happiness, right? Couldn't feel joy. There was a little sadness, what one might call depression, but it was fleeting. It was angry, mad, sad, happy, joy, passion, all of that just disappeared. It just left one day. And I couldn't figure out why, because I kept pushing away those things that needed to be nurtured away. So, I say all that. This is my second session at IFS. The first session was sort of the evaluation session. Today's session, we looked at one of my exiles, one of my parts, my exile parts. And amazingly, I was skeptical about this, but my therapist asked me to speak to one of my parts. I know it sounds weird, basically speaking to yourself. Now, I didn't speak in an audible voice, because that's just a little too weird for me, even though I do talk to myself at times. But I spoke in the mind to that part, and I reassured that part that was hurt. Then I reassured that part that, hey, dude, it's okay. We got through this. And I also was told to share with that part parts of me later on in life that show positiveness instead of negativeness. And when I did that, at that moment, something lit up. It was very subtle. I hadn't felt it like that in a while, but it was very subtle. So we continued to talk in the conversation, and we got to some other parts and talked about some other things going on, because there's still a lot of work to do. But as I'm driving, I get a buzz right here. I have not felt that buzz in that way for that long. And it may come back, I don't know. I have not felt that in 7 years, in 8 years, I'm sorry. In 8 years, I have not felt that. I've been wanting to feel that feeling. It was a happy feeling. I mean, I wasn't, but it had me, you know, it had me in the car like, I need to take this. So that's why I'm doing this, sharing with you guys my first IFS session, digging into some of my parts. So I'm going to continue as I work through this IFS therapy to share, you know, some of the results that's happening with me, so I can reflect back on the therapy itself, and as well to help others to understand and to know that this very well may work. Again, I felt something today leaving out of therapy that I haven't felt in 8 years, man. 8 years. I was getting ready to go take all kind of pills and medicines and stuff. So I'm gonna keep working at this, because the program, you can actually do IFS therapy on your own. The therapist helps to dig deeper. So it's good to have a therapist, but you don't necessarily need it. At least not to start. But a therapist, I see it definitely helps. She pointed out some things. She helped me to look at my inner part and to talk to my inner part up here and nurture and reassure that inner part that, hey, we good. We 39 now, I'm not 13 anymore. And it made me happy. So that's what I wanted to share. One book that I started with that I found some of my parts through, Jay Early, Self-Therapy. It's a good book, but the program itself is developed and originates from Dick Schwartz. Google him and you'll get all the information that you need. Alright, so this is Where's Yish. I'm right here. See you next time.